Welcome to the Iranian Republic. Today, we're hosting Patrick Clawson. Patrick, thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
I remember last time we talked, we were talking about negotiations, and you mentioned, oh, it might be a surprise. We don't know. And the surprise happened. And we were talking about different aspects of the strategy of Israel in terms of attacking Iran and kicking the can down the road, maybe by a couple of years. And you mentioned that the one scenario is that Israel is thinking that, okay, we kick the can down the road a couple of years, uh, erode the nuclear capabilities of Iran, and then maybe Khamenei dies, maybe things change inside Iran. And the war happened. We saw what happened in the war. And I wanted to know, what do you think about Israel being able to achieve their objectives in terms of being able to destroy nuclear program, destroy the missile program of the Islamic Republic, and also as a secondary objective, being able to topple the Islamic Republic.
Uh,
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And what was that a goal to change the regime in Iran through an aerial campaign?
well, not particularly. I think the principal goal was to set back the nuclear program because Israel had gotten information, which the U.S. also got, that Iran's nuclear had made considerable advances with nuclear weaponization. And the U.S. side interpreted this as meaning that Iran's getting ready, positioning itself, but hasn't necessarily made a decision to develop a bomb. Whereas the Israelis said, it's not good enough for us. We're very concerned about these advances and decided that it had to happen. I think Israel was somewhat surprised during the course of the war in discovering just how effective Iran's missile program was. Yes, Israel had considerable successes in knocking out the missiles, and it probably took out fully half of the missiles that Iran has that could reach Israel. But the missiles that were left were quite accurate and hit their targets with considerable precision. And furthermore, there was a race going on between Israel and Iran in this war of attrition. Israel thought it was doing pretty well in the war of attrition, but not perfectly. And the big question is going to be how quickly can Iran ramp up its production of missiles, and how much can Israel find out about that, and how much will Israel do about it. But I think the missile program turned out to be quite a considerable threat. And yes, Israel had ways of dealing with the threat, but quite a number of missiles got through and caused quite a bit of damage. And so, changing the regime, of course, Israel will be delighted if the regime were to fall, depending on what replaced it. And if, for instance, after Khamenei's death, what we see is the rise of a military group that's very competent and determined, then that's not better for Israel. And during the war, of course, the Israelis killed quite a number of Iranian military commanders and had quite an effect. But on the other hand, Iran was able to appoint new military commanders quite quickly, and they seem to be quite competent people, and they seem to be functioning quite well. There was no indications of that confusion or change of command and the chain of command breaking down in Iran. And so that suggests that Iran's got a leadership in depth, and that eliminating the top leaders would have a temporary effect, but not necessarily the ongoing effect of the sort that killing Shamkhani did. Killing Shamkhani had a really knocked Quds Force out as an effective player in regional politics. And
You mean Soleimani or
excuse me,
Shamkhani?
I'm sorry, I said Shamkhani. Soleimani.
Because Shamkhani got away.
Shamkhani got away, more or
Yeah.
less. But
Yeah.
Soleimani, killing Soleimani had a real impact on regional politics, and I think some people thought that perhaps killing some of the top commanders, for instance, the aerospace force, could have the same kind of ongoing impact, but doesn't seem to. Had a temporary impact, but not necessarily an ongoing impact.
Gotcha. And you think so? We saw that Israel bombed police headquarters, Evin prison, and also the one of the headquarters for the anti-riot police, which are brutal forces cracking down on any protests in Iran. Uh, what are your thoughts on that? Did they? What did Israelis really think that by through an aerial campaign they can change the regime in Iran? And did they have any promises from any groups on the ground in Iran? Or what are your thoughts on that? Do you think what
Well,
was the
come on.
calculus behind?
I don't think that the Israelis would have credited much promises from groups on the ground. Who knows what they're going to do? I think the Israelis tried a number of things to see, well, what impact will this have? If Israel's engaging in such a wide-ranging bombing campaign, that dropping a few bombs on a few regime targets was a sideshow. It was not a concerted and deliberate campaign. It was something was well, let's see what happens. And I think the results were disappointing. I don't think that Israel necessarily go that route if fighting resumes. If Israel were to go on a campaign against the top leadership, it would be a concerted campaign against the top leadership, and not just an isolated strike at the Supreme National Security Council, but a determined campaign against them. And that's the kind of determined campaign we saw against the military leadership, but we didn't see it against the political leadership.
I see. And do you think the reason they didn't go after Khamenei was that they were not capable? Because I remember Israel Katz having an interview saying that we didn't have Khamenei on our sites, otherwise we would have acted. Do you think that's the case, or there was some other news that Donald Trump prevented them from attacking Khamenei? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think going after Khamenei would be a whole lot of work. Israel spent many years tracking Hassan Nasrallah, for instance, making sure that they knew exactly where he was, figuring out in great detail how they would attack him, and devoted very substantial resources to the attack on Nasrallah's compound, which, by the way, was not sufficient to blow up that compound. Nasrallah died of asphyxiation because the bombs cut off the oxygen to and going after Khamenei would be a lot of work. You have to devote a lot of resources to figuring out exactly where he was in a given moment and figuring out what was the exact configuration of that place. I mean, look at the tremendous efforts that the U.S. government put into analyzing Fordo and figuring out how to attack Fordo. With, by all indications, with very positive results. It does not look like Iran had anticipated that there would be the bombs would come down the ventilation shaft. When you look at all the effort that Iran put into blocking the front entrances, but not the ventilation shafts, it suggests, oops, Iran was not quite aware of the vulnerabilities. I'm reminded of the original Star Wars movie in which this horrible weapon that's been developed by the Emperor gets blown up because of an unexpected opening that had been left for an attack. Well, I think that figuring out an unexpected opening for an attack on Khamenei is a very demanding task. And it's not clear that Israel put that kind of effort into figuring out where he was, and how to get him.
Gotcha. And then, what do you think is the status of nuclear program and the missile program of Islamic Republic? Yeah, we know that
Well, look, we don't know. I'm
we
not
don't
sure.
know.
I'm sure the Islamic Republic knows, right? And that making an assessment of what happened to all that nuclear material is quite difficult. So, for instance, quite an amount of that nuclear material is stored in gaseous form, and if the electricity goes off, the gas could congeal, and then you got a big problem of converting it back into gaseous form. So, just because you say, "Wow, it survived," yeah, but how did it survive, and how accessible is it? It's not clear the Islamic Republic knows, and we certainly don't know. Furthermore, there's a lot of imprecision in the questions people ask about the nuclear program. Um, is your question, can Iran produce one crude nuclear device? Or is your question, does Iran have a substantial nuclear program that can produce a number of sophisticated weapons that could be put on missiles? Two very different questions. We know from the documents the Israelis stole and the so-called Ahmad plan that Iran's intention was to produce a small arsenal, probably 5 nuclear weapons in a very short order. They didn't want to have just one. They wanted to have several. And furthermore, they wanted deliverable bombs. They didn't just want a crude device that explodes the way North Korea had a crude device that exploded. And so when you ask the question, well, did the nuclear program survive? Well, what do you mean? You're saying, can Iran produce one crude device relatively soon? That's a lot less demanding than producing a small arsenal of bombs sophisticated enough they can be delivered by missile. And it would certainly appear that Iran would have difficulty producing uh, an arsenal of a number of weapons. Producing one bomb, one simple device, that's a lot easier, and
And,
that's something Iran might well be able to do.
and by one simple device, I mean something that Iran can just test and say we have this capability and that's it. And by arsenal, we mean miniaturize the warheads that can be placed on ballistic missiles, right?
Right, and a number of them, at least
At
5.
least five.
If you go the North Korean route of exploding a one simple device, when that's all you got, that's like saying to the world, "Hey, I'm dangerous. Come take me out." And in the North Korean case, that made sense because North Korea had always had a powerful deterrent of 10,000 artillery tubes aimed at Seoul, and so the long time fear had been that North Korea would attack with its very large army and its many artillery tubes and devastate Seoul. So but that's not true with Iran. Iran does not have Hezbollah and the threat of Hezbollah rockets hitting Israel the way it once did. Iran does not have proxy forces that struck fear in the Gulf countries. Um, and so Iran has to worry that if it had just one simple device that it tested, that the response of Israel and the United States would be to attack extensively and destroy Iran's ability to produce more.
And speaking of the United States, what do you think happened with the Trump's administration? Do you think, according to the New York Times reports, they were on board from the beginning? The idea, oh, let's continue our negotiations on Sunday, was just a trap for Iranians, and they're all in line with Israelis to kind of coordinate this attack. We make Iranians kind of comfortable by negotiations. Therefore, you will have your opening for the attack. And then at the end, the United States entered the campaign and bombed Fordo. And
Well, I think the United States started the negotiations, hopeful that the negotiations would lead someplace. After
so it was
all,
a good faith negotiation.
yeah. Well, Trump, after all, said you got 60 days to come to the deal, and the Israelis attacked him on the 61st day. Okay, so the Iranians paid absolutely no attention to that 60-day deadline, and they paid no attention to offers that were made to them to try to reach a deal at the last minute. I mean, for a long time, Witkoff refused to propose any kind of a deal, and he did propose one, and Iran did not respond, and missed several opportunities which were presented to Iran both by the United States and by others, Europeans, the Turks, the Omanis, as people, this is your last chance. You really got to take this. And Iran ignored all that, and took the idea, we don't have to worry. Well, they were wrong. They were wrong. And what we've seen several times with Trump, whether it was the attack on the Houthis, whether it was the attack during the first Trump administration on Soleimani, is that Trump will take action. And if what we've seen with his tariffs, he takes action. And so, if you ignore him, the way Putin's ignoring him about Ukraine, you're playing a very dangerous game, and the Iranians lost, and the Iranians hadn't been paying that much attention to how the mood in Israel, both in the ruling circles and the military, for that matter, the population, had shifted. And there was a real sense in Israel that they were in a powerful position, and that they ought to take advantage of this now before things changed.
Mm-hmm. And before we continue, I just wanted to get back about that crude nuclear device versus having an arsenal. You think Iran is far away from creating that arsenal now versus what it was before the war?
Yes. I think that a lot of the focus on killing nuclear scientists was to make it much more difficult for Iran to create sophisticated devices that can survive on a missile. I mean, after all, missiles, when they go up, they shake things, they heat when they return back into the atmosphere, they heat things up. It's really complicated for something as delicate and sophisticated as a nuclear weapon. It's not like just a bunch of ordinary explosives, right? I mean, a missile war, when it lands, causes a heck of a lot of damage just because it's traveling so fast and it's got a lot of metal there. And so you can get a lot of bang out of a missile, even without a warhead. And with a relatively simple chemical warhead, it's not that hard to explode it. But a nuclear weapon, boy, that's really much more complicated.
And then what about the missile program? Do you think it was set back by several years? Iran lost its capability to produce a large number of missiles that it was planning to?
Not at all clear. So when the Israelis struck at a supply of a very important component for missile fuel that was being imported from China, the Israelis thought that'll set back the Iranians by many months, maybe even a couple of years. No, it didn't. The Iranians very quickly replaced that stuff. And it would appear that the Iranian program is more robust and may be able to respond more quickly than Israel hoped for. So we'll have to see. But Israel put quite a bit of effort into taking out the missile production facilities and for taking out especially launcher production facilities, because that's one of the key constraints on how many missiles you can be sent against Israel is the launchers. So it's not like you take a missile out like a firecracker and just put a match to it and off the thing goes. You got to have a launcher, and
right.
The Israelis put a lot of effort into taking out launchers.
I see. And do you think the attacks on the Western missile bases have been very successful? So we saw in the first few days, we had the order of hundreds of missiles, or salvos of 50, and then 150 a day. But then at the end, we were seeing 20 missiles a day, or 10, 15 missiles a day.
Yeah, except the penetration rate of those 20 missiles a day, went up. And so by the end of the war, the penetration rate seems to have been at least 1 in 6. And even though there were fewer of them, one thing, this was a war of attrition. So Israel was running out of its anti-missile defenses. It had to rely on a whole bunch of anti-missile defenses that the United States provided, and those are in short supply. I mean,
Yeah,
between Ukraine and trying to stock up a good supply in case of a Taiwan invasion, those are in really tight supply. And the number of those anti-missile systems being produced anywhere in the world, whether it's in Europe or the United States or in Israel, eh, nowhere near as many as the missiles and drones that are being produced, right? So, yeah, it's true that the number of missiles that Iran was launching at Israel declined, but the number that got through went up.
so do you think it was on purpose to deplete the air defenses at first, then start a war of attrition?
Not necessarily. No, not
So
necessarily. But it just
yeah,
that's how modern warfare goes. Is it turns out to be much more war of attrition than expected. And if we take a look at whether it was the Armenian-Azerbaijani war, which is one of the first times we saw this massive use of drones, or the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which I mean, the number of drones being used by the Russians against the Ukrainians is just truly stunning,
correct.
and several orders of magnitude higher than what anybody had anticipated.
Right. And then I just wanted to get back to this as well. So on one side, we have U.S. government supporting Israel with interceptor missiles and in so many different ways. And on the other hand, we have Russians and Chinese, and I'm not sure how much they supported the Islamic Republic,
No,
and if at all.
no,
So
nobody came to the Islamic Republic's help. I mean, Hezbollah did not fire a single bullet during the 12-day war. That is stunning. Not a single bullet from Hezbollah during the 12-day war.
and that says a lot for spending billions of dollars on Hezbollah from
What
Iran.
did you get for it? You know, I mean, if Iran has to debate how much did this strategy that it long had of a ring of fire and of having all these proxy groups. I mean, you know, Assad's gone. Hezbollah didn't fire a single bullet during this 12-day war, when universally the assumption had been that the event of an Israeli attack on Iran, Hezbollah would let loose, and that we'd see hell and destruction raining down on Haifa and much of northern Israel. And some Israeli commentators had talked about more than 1 million people fleeing northern Israel because of the Hezbollah rockets that would come raining down on them. No, didn't happen. Didn't happen. And we didn't see anything from the Iraqi militias. And frankly, we didn't see very much from the Houthis. And so Iran was left pretty much alone. I mean, I really was on its side during this war. And some of the statements made by the Europeans were going, well, shame that happened. It's not exactly, no, oh my God, how horrible, how terrible, how could the Israelis do this? Wow, we have to cut off supplies to Israel. No, it was much more, I mean, the Germans most clearly, but others too, sort of, the attitude was, oh, well, it's a shame that happened.
Exactly.
And in part because, you know, the Iranians had been ignoring the Europeans' desire to proceed, and the Europeans have been warning, look, to Iran, you got to come to a deal pretty soon, or else we're going to do the UN snapback, and time is short, and you got to come to a deal, and the Iranians just ignored them. And so the European attitude was, what'd you expect?
Right. And I wanted to get to the U.S. side. You think how much U.S. government will support Israel? We see like conflict with Iran, the ethnic cleansing in Gaza, and then the Syria conflict with Syria. And do you think is there a limit to U.S. support for Israel?
You know, nothing succeeds like success. And so Tucker Carlson looks pretty stupid for having predicted that if the United States attacked Iran, that thousands of Americans would die. Well, that's not quite what happened, right? Not quite what happened at all. And in fact, you know, not a single Israeli plane was shot down. Not one. I mean, correct. Ordinarily, an operation this size, you expect a few planes to go down just from malfunction.
Yeah.
Right? And nothing. I mean, it's stunning. Absolutely stunning how successful the Israelis have been, not only in this, but also in the pager attacks, the attack on Nasrallah, the attack on the guest house in central Tehran, right? I mean, if you take a look, the Israelis have not been so confident at getting the hostages, and it took them forever to find Sinwar. But man, on everything else, and if you look at what's happened in Gaza, okay, so a lot of people around the world have objected, but the war goes on. When the war started in November 2023, we here at the Washington Institute thought, well, Israel's got to wrap this up in a few months. No. And so, support for Israel has declined substantially in the United States and around the world, but nothing succeeds like success. And so the Israelis can say quite credibly that, look, one of the major threats to the U.S. interests worldwide was Iran, and Israel did quite a lot of damage to that Iranian threat.
Gotcha. So as long as they're succeeding, you think there's going to be support, and nothing brings success like success.
Exactly. And I think that also was true about whatever the U.S. may have said to Israel before the war, and that a number of influential Israelis have said quietly that, okay, we got some promises from the U.S. that help that they, in case Israel attacked Iran, but those promises didn't mean anything if the attack went badly. If the attack was going badly, the U.S. would say, "Oops, we'll change our mind." And so it was the grand successes of the Israeli attack and that how they completely dominated the airspace over Iran. I mean, good Lord, that was just stunning. Air defenses, the Iranian Air Force. I mean, none of that was there. None of that.
Yeah. And that's stunning. I was going to ask you, what do you think that was the most important factor and parameter in Israelis being able to be successful? Was it intelligence? Was it superior military technology? What was it?
Iranian overconfidence and stupidity. And the comments often made about warfare, the enemy gets a vote. And in this case, boy, let me tell you, the enemy had practically no vote. And that where the hell were air defense radars? Where the hell were sirens? Where the hell were bunkers? Where was all these top commanders go to a meeting in the same frigging room? Come on, give me a break. All right, so the Israelis had drones that could take after them. But we saw with the Ukrainian attack on the sites in Siberia that there's a risk of the other guy sneaking drones into your country and launching an attack. You might want to take that lesson into account. And it was just stunning that the Iranians have not done that. By the way, the U.S. military hasn't done it either. And so the U.S. military remains extremely vulnerable to somebody using those kinds of techniques against the U.S. military here in the United States. And if it happens, they'll go, oh, who expected that? Well, the answer is, you idiots, you should expect it. And so Iran was quite unprepared for what happened, and no effective backup plans for what to do in the event that the Israeli attack was more successful than expected. And after what happened to Hezbollah, not surprising that Iran's advice to Hezbollah was don't do anything. And Hezbollah, it was a wise thing for Iran to advise Hezbollah not to do anything because Hezbollah wouldn't have done anything anyway.
Yeah. Save something that doesn't even exist. So, okay, so we got that. And then speaking of Ukraine, do you think Ukrainians were involved as well in some intelligence operations and in other ways? Because we've heard news of some news agencies in Iran claiming that they have arrested people connected to the Ukrainian service, but
yeah, conceivably. I mean, certainly Iran meddling in the Ukraine-Russian war doesn't look as bright today as it did 6 months ago. So Iran was so proud of how its drones helped the Russians and how much the Russians would help them. I don't see any indications that Russia is prepared to provide air defense systems to Iran. And you know, the people who are reporting on the recent trip of Larijani and what's his name, the defense minister, to Moscow, it doesn't look like they got any air defense systems, right? And it looks like they did ask for air defense systems. So you know, the Iranians meddling in the Russian-Ukrainian war, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for trouble. And it would hardly be surprising if the Ukrainians or people sympathetic to the Ukrainians were delighted to see the Iranians taken down and preoccupied at home.
And speaking of that, so there was this article in I believe it was in Guardian, showing that Russia, they have made the manufacturing inside Russia, manufacturing of
Right.
the drones inside Russia. They're decoupled their dependence on Iranian technology. They're producing it themselves on a massive scale. And some people in Russia even welcomes that because they welcome the war between Iran and Israel because they say, oh, it's going to bring up the price of oil. It's going to be good for us. And do you think this is going to change the calculus for Khamenei in terms of how he thinks China and Russia are going to support him?
He hasn't been too bright in figuring that out up to now. Maybe he'll become brighter now. But for a long time, Iran's calculus has been that they have to defend themselves. And that was an accurate calculus, right? But I would certainly think that a wise calculation out of the recent conflict has been that the missiles work pretty well, and that the missile program is worth continuing to pursue and expand. The nuclear program, not so clear, not so clear. You know that all the money spent on the nuclear program, what did you get for it, right? Whereas the missile program and the drone programs, pretty darn successful.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into the missile program then. So you believe that missile program of the Islamic Republic was successful? I'm curious to know your thoughts, especially about the missiles and drones, and because I know drones were not successful in hitting that many targets. I remember one report of one place was getting hit in Israel, but I'm curious to know your thoughts on those programs because you seem to believe that they have been pretty successful, and I'll get into how they played into like having a ceasefire.
Well, look, what Iran needs to figure out is a way to launch drones from closer in, because launching a drone against Israel, launching a drone from Iran against Israel. Come on, give me a break. The Israelis have hours of advanced notifications coming. I mean, yeah, well, I think things you can do, right? And what you need to be able to do is do something like what the Israelis did of launching those drones from couple kilometers away, right? That's what you need to be able to do. And the Islamic Republic doesn't look like it's put much effort into that and hasn't been very successful. So, you know, even with Hezbollah, the whole focus with Hezbollah was in giving Hezbollah missiles that could be launched rather than large numbers of drones. The drone attacks from Hamas were much more successful. And that's because they were from right nearby. So I think the Iranian drones have turned out to be very useful for the Russians. The drone technology turned out to be very useful. But after all, this is, you know, they're launching them from a few dozens of kilometers away on the whole. Now, the Ukrainians have gotten to be better at developing long-distance drones, and the Ukrainian drones have had more success in long-distance strikes. And but even there, the Ukrainians' biggest success with the drone strikes have come when they smuggled the drones into Russia.
Correct.
Right? Yep. The strikes in Siberia were a real wake-up call for the Russians.
Right. And then what about the missile program? Do you think it was the missile program and the missile attacks from Iran that caused the ceasefire, and Israel came on and said, okay, we want a ceasefire. We think it's a time to declare a win and finish
the ceasefire came from Trump, because Trump wanted to have the U.S. attack be a once-off attack and then be able to declare that he ended the war. So the ceasefire came from Trump, not It wasn't the Israelis who made the ceasefire. I think the Israeli attitude was, perhaps mistakenly, that they were winning the war of attrition about missiles versus anti-missile programs. And so I think the Israelis were quite prepared to continue the war and continue to hit missile targets, to continue to hit regime targets. Um, and the ceasefire was very much the product of Donald Trump. That said, the Israeli censorship did mask what were some pretty substantial damages caused by those Iranian missiles. I mean, the missile attack on the Weizmann Institute in Haifa, for instance, or the missile attack on the Haifa refinery, has caused a heck of a lot of damage. And the Israeli Ministry of Finance program, which compensates private individuals, not institutions, but private individuals, acknowledges that it's spending well over $1 billion. I think it's going to be over $2 billion in compensating people for damage caused by Iranian missiles. And that does not include what appears to have been some $500 million or more in damage to the Weizmann Institute, and also hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to the Haifa refinery. The damage to the Haifa refinery is a little complicated to calculate because Israel was planning to close down that refinery. So, losing the refinery just accelerated the plans a little bit to close it down.
Right. And do you think the military infrastructure of Israel have been significantly damaged? We had reports of 5 places that were get hit, but with 1 ballistic missile.
No,
you don't believe so?
No. It's actually quite difficult to take out an air base that's well protected and Israel has for 60 years been planning for people who would attack its air bases, and so they have shelters for their planes, and so it's really quite difficult to take them out. I mean, once they're the U.S., for instance, will park its planes, or the Russians will park their planes in plain view, and you take one out, and the explosion will knock out a few others to side. That's not the Israeli approach. The Israeli approach is much more to put things in shelters. The way that, frankly, what NATO did during the Cold War in Europe is they had shelters for their planes.
I see. And then speaking of that ceasefire, seems like the sentiment inside Israel, at least like some people, is that this is a job not done. We haven't finished the job. And what do you think that's going to play out? What do you think is going to happen in the future?
Look, I don't know. I mean, I think that Israel would like to have the ceasefire with Iran be like the ceasefire with Hezbollah. And the ceasefire that Israel reached with Hezbollah in November has been characterized as, so Hezbollah ceases and Israel fires. And that's how that ceasefire has worked, and that Israel has continued to strike repeatedly at Hezbollah assets in spite of the ceasefire.
So one-sided ceasefire, anyway.
Well, there are certain rules, and Hezbollah keeps cheating on them, and Israel says, no, we're not going to put up with the cheating the way we used to, right? So we'll see what happens, but I mean, the mood in Tehran, the mood in Iran seems to be that that's what the Israelis are doing. And frankly, that would fit with Israeli practice, is to engage in all kinds of attack. I don't know if they are or not. I tend to suspect, frankly, that most of the explosions in Iran are because of the really bad state of the Iranian infrastructure, rather than the Mossad. But I wouldn't rule out the idea that some of them are from the Mossad, and I'm sure they're happy to claim credit for all of them.
Yeah. And so going forward, what do you think is going to be the end game for Israel? Is it to just wreck Iran, try to not necessarily topple the government directly, so it might be replaced with something even worse for Israel, but to just weaken the state of Iran as a state, just activate some armed militias around the country and try to just weaken the regime? What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is the end game for Israel?
Look, the United States, U.S. thinkers and the U.S. public, we want an end game. So we want something like the way World War II ended. It's over. It's done. It's finished. And the Powell Doctrine, that General Powell came out, when do you use force? One decisive result. That's not Israeli approach. The Israeli approach is not to solve things. The Israeli approach is to manage it. So the Israeli approach is described in the expression mow the lawn.
Long.
In other words, the lawn is going to keep on growing. You can't stop the lawn from growing. And so you're going to have to go back and mow the lawn periodically. So Israel has, for decades, been used to the idea that its opponents are going to be opposed to it no matter what. They're not going to change and forget it. And so Israel has to be prepared to go back and hit them again and again and again. So Israel's not necessarily looking for an end state. Israel's looking for a way to manage a problem.
Gotcha. And this is a nice way to put it then. So speaking of all of this together, what do you, so a hypothetical scenario and something that I think a lot of people in Iran would like to see is let's say the regime changes by the people, let's say to a nonviolent, ideally to a nonviolent revolution, regime changes. What do you think is going to be the reaction of Israel depending on who comes to power?
Look, the Israelis
there's a chance for it even?
Sure. Look, the Israelis are very suspicious. Very suspicious. You take a look at the Israeli attitudes toward Shara in Syria, right? The Israelis are very suspicious. So, as soon as Assad goes, the first thing that Israel does is a massive campaign of bombing everything that the Syrian military had. Frankly, given an opportunity with a new government in Iran, that would be the Israeli first instinct, is to be suspicious and to say, okay, now's the time that we can go after, take out whole bunches of things we'd like to take out. So this has been a difference between the Israeli approach and the approach of many others. We've seen many others saying to the Israelis, look, don't do that. You're going to make Shara into an enemy when he frankly doesn't care about Israel. And I suspect that if there were a new government in Iran, that there would be many people advising the Israeli government to take advantage of the opportunity. That's not going to be the first instinct of the Israeli establishment or of Israeli politicians.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you so much. Any other final thoughts and comments about the conflict that you would like Iranians to know? Because we will be distributing this program to Iranians mostly, and it will be on YouTube public for everyone, and everyone will be watching it. But also, we're going to put a translation as article for people. Yeah.
This is not like the Iran-Iraq War that ended. All right. This is going to be an ongoing conflict that's going to be going on and on and on. And I don't see much indications that either side is prepared to end this conflict.
Okay, so you think it's going to keep going on? And one last question, actually, I wanted to ask was, what are your thoughts on factions of the opposition who were defending the strike? And do you think they had connections with Israel, or they're getting support from Israel, or what do you think about?
Look, it's obvious that there are many people in the Iranian opposition who are torn between a nationalist impulse of saying, "Please don't attack our homeland," and saying, "Oh, you're attacking the regime, what a good thing." And we see this often. And God only knows which impulse will win out with which group. Why Israel may be providing support for certain groups, I'm not convinced that the Israeli support is going to be the main factor in the decisions of any group about what to do.
Thank you so much. Because what people have observed is that I feel like the general public opinion in Iran is opposing that and leaning more towards that nationalistic impulse.
Yeah, well, after Soleimani's death, we heard a lot about how there's going to be all kind of nationalist responses, and it's going to be national unity, and people are going to oppose it. Well, it lasted for a few months. I'm not convinced that this nationalist burst now is going to last any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also at that time, the Iran regime botched that opportunity by killing civilians in PS7. Yeah,
the Masa Amini stuff, and
then Masa Amini after that.
And look, but in the situation in which Tehran and many other provinces is shut down because of a lack of water and because of lack of electricity, People aren't too happy with the government. People are not. I mean,
Absolutely, yes.
you're going to have to have a nationalist rally behind a government that can't provide you with water or electricity.
Yeah,
That's a tough sell. That's a really tough
yeah,
sell.
absolutely. And do you think like people like Mousavi and other people who are inside Iran, opposition inside Iran, do you think they have any chance given the
Well,
situation? Like on one side you have Israel, on the other side you have this brutal regime.
look, what's stunning to me is that Mousavi, the 180 people who signed that a petition by a group of economists, rumors about Rouhani and Ahmed Khomeini, doesn't seem the regime's come down on them with a ton of bricks. There was a time when the regime did come, really took strong action
Yeah,
against people who made these kinds of statements. I don't see that happening right now. Now, maybe it's it will, but I haven't seen it yet. And I think that is, to me, a big change, is that the regime doesn't seem to be sufficiently confident to go after its enemies the way it once did. Or not enemies, but its friendly critics, right? So, somebody like Rouhani is not an enemy of the Islamic Republic, but he wants to modify the Islamic Republic so it can function better. Okay, but was a time when the response of the regime would have been to say, okay, you can't be quoted anywhere in the press, you can't leave the country, you can't do anything. I don't see those kinds of measures being taken against Rouhani and Mousavi.
mhm. So the regime is backing down because of this war, a little bit at least.
Backing down, they're not coming down. They're not coming down on friendly critics the way they once did.
Gotcha. Yeah, and we've seen other indications of that as well. Uh, I wanted to thank you, Patrick.
Thank
It was
you.
great, like always. I
Okay,
enjoyed our discussion. Yeah,
sounds good.
and
Take care.